6, ABC. So at the age of 36, the life of the princess whose fairy tale marriage turned into a nightmare on a worldwide stage has come to a tragic end. And the world continues to react with stunned grief for Britain's Princess Diana.
The story began in July of 1961 when Diana was born to Lord Spencer and his wife Frances Shand Kidd. She lived a childhood of landed grace, estates, and prep school. But with all the influence and baronial heritage, she chose a career working with children, a bond that would last the rest of her life. At the age of 19, shy Lady Di was thrust onto the world stage when Charles, the world's most eligible prince, chose her to be princess.
She's been brave enough to take me on.
And I suppose in love.
Of course. Whatever in love means.
Whatever love was, it appeared to last through the birth of two sons, William, who may one day be king, and little brother Harry, whom the British people embraced as if they were their own. The royal family had rarely been as popular. But it was popularity, Diana's, that exposed the first visible cracks in the fairy tale. Charles was rumored to feel Diana was getting all the attention when it was he who would inherit the throne. On a trip to Wales, his displeasure was thinly veiled.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had two wives, to have covered both sides of the street.
As the years wore on, the marriage became more threadbare. Charles and Diana made little attempt in public to hide the growing coldness between them. Diana, it would later be revealed, was suffering from bulimia, an eating disorder, and made several suicide attempts that friends described as cries for help.
I think the biggest disease this world suffers from in this day and age is the disease of people feeling unloved.
It became clear that from the beginning, the fairy tale was a sham. For all of the pomp and circumstance, Diana married a man whom it seemed loved not her, but this woman, Camilla Parker Bowles.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
In December of 1992, the royal separation was announced in the British Parliament. Diana struck out on her own, working with AIDS patients, drug addicts, and alcoholics. But the pressure of a very public and bitter divorce that went all the way to he said, she said books took its toll on Diana. She asked the public for some time off.
I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far.
But she could not escape the pressures of and interest in her personal life. Pressures that conspired on a Paris street to take away the princess and any chance of a happy ending.
Good evening. It's time for the live lottery draw.
This is an ABC News special. Diana, Princess of Wales, the royal tragedy.
She was the symbol of 20th century glamour. She was the people's princess. She was the mother of the future King of England. She had a shocking effect on the British royal family. She was forced to live her own dreams and her own tortures in the searing glare of the media. She was ultimately tragic. Good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Jennings. She certainly fulfilled all of our expectations as to what a 20th century princess should be. She was beautiful, innocent, charming, but as we've heard so many times today, ultimately tragic. This broadcast for the next couple of hours is about tragedy as much as anything else, about a young woman, she was only 36, for whom the word star seems somehow inadequate. Her effect on the royal family in Britain and how her marriage to Prince Charles unraveled has fascinated millions and millions of people. But it's also had a profound effect on the monarchy in Britain, which only a generation ago was as solid as anything British could be. We, in the press, nicknamed her Shy Di. She was a nursery school teacher, and she had her first brush with the press, look closely, when we learned that she would marry Charles. Just stand there with your back to the sun, some photographer suggested. That was the famous picture, and she said at the time, "I don't want to be remembered as having no petticoat." We weren't supposed to be soppy, but the public and the press fell in love with her and stayed that way for a long time. But the fairy tale, as we all now know, that was meant to be, turned out to be a soap opera, and as we have said many times today, tragic. I'm joined tonight by two people who knew her and who covered her, Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer. What was your reaction as a journalist when you first heard the news?
Let me just tell you my reaction right now watching this, looking at that wedding. You and I covered that wedding. It was 16 years ago when we saw her walking in that huge dress, seeming so young and innocent was the word you used. How did I feel last night? Unbelieving. Still do, in part because we had thought that she was just injured. I mean, we'd heard that she'd hurt her arm and a thigh, and then the next moment we heard she was gone, and I still can't believe it. The last time I saw her was at the auction, where she was surrounded by people when her clothes were auctioned, giggling, handling the paparazzi, and then you and I were at the same dinner for her in the spring, and she was awfully happy then, wasn't she?
She was happy, but she always had this exotic contradiction, and I think it's part of what attracted us to her. She seemed completely innocent, and she knew everything going on in the room at all times, and she would approach you as if you were going to be the person to say the thing to her that would console her for her life, so that she could do these things simultaneously.
When you first heard the news today, did you think it was going to be as big a story as it's turned out to be all over the world?
Yes, yes. There is something mythological about this story, as we know. And you talked about her effect on the monarchy. You know, I think to some extent we have underestimated the extent to which this was a calculation on her part. She was a rebel. I said to Sarah Ferguson once, you two were Thelma and Louise in the palace, and she said yes, because she wanted to change the monarchy. She believed that reserve was actually killing the monarchy, and she was going to change it.
She also had it in for the monarchy, too, didn't she? She didn't just want to change the monarchy. She had it in for the royal family.
But she also was beginning to become what she wanted to become. She wasn't Thelma, but she was Thelma and Louise, and then she moved away. She moved away from Sarah Ferguson. She tried to move away from that life with all of the good deeds that she did, all of the seriousness, trying to be that, what was it, the Queen of Hearts, the Princess of Hearts. And along with that was the contradiction and the humor, because she could tease herself. She knew what she was doing and had fun with it.
Well, you've touched, each of you, on quite a lot to talk about in the next couple of hours. Her as a personality, her as a do-good person, her as a private and tortured person, the British royal family. And without question, we shall be talking today about the press, because in this country and elsewhere today, a lot of people think that because she was being pursued last night, yet again, as she was always, by the photographers, that the press is in some way responsible for her death. In this country, we learned of it late at night, as most of Britain slept, certainly most of Europe slept, and Britain woke up to the news today. It was shock at first, and then it has turned to very, very deep sorrow, some confusion, and some anger. And we're joined tonight by ABC's Aaron Brown, who is live just outside Kensington Palace, her residence in central London. Aaron?
Peter, this is Kensington Palace, where the princess lived. This feels like the saddest place on earth right now. Anyone who has spent any time watching our coverage knows that people have been coming here all day. They've been bringing poems and notes. They're all around the fences here, tons of flowers. They have come here to grieve in a very quiet and dignified way, all for a woman they never met, but all felt like they knew. The body of Diana, the Princess of Wales, arrived back in Britain from France tonight aboard a military plane, accompanied by her former husband, Prince Charles. It was the end of a long day, a day that began when British broadcasters wearing black ties announced the shocking news to a waking nation.
This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to a hospital in the city early this morning. Surgeons spent 2 hours trying to save her life, but she died at 4 o'clock from severe chest injuries.
Throughout the country today, there were memorial services, including one this evening at St. Paul's Cathedral, where Princess Diana was married 16 years ago. Dodi Fayed's body was brought back to London as well tonight, his coffin taken first to a mosque in central London, and then he was buried. But in truth, it is Diana's death that has shocked the country most. Prime Minister Tony Blair saying what many people thought.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her 2 sons, the 2 boys. How many times shall we remember her? In how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy.
She was just a wonderful person. I think that she's completely irreplaceable. I don't think anyone could take her place.
A light has gone out. It won't come back on again, not in my lifetime.
The National Telephone Counseling Service opened up its lines today to take calls from a grieving public.
So you're really feeling for both of the boys that they're left without a mother, and that really makes you very sad.
Tonight, this is truly a nation in shock, a nation that is disbelieving yet at the same time grief-stricken, a nation that is numb but also angry, and that anger is building, and that anger is directed at the press.
You, press that killed her. You're the scum.
Yes. Most of the anger was directed at the paparazzi, the photographers who pursued Diana relentlessly from the earliest days of her engagement to Prince Charles. After their separation, she said she had not been aware of just how overwhelming the media attention.
Those duties, ironically, already included dealing with photographers. We couldn't help but notice how Prince William took charge of a family photo opportunity with his brother and cousins. It was on a ski trip, and he negotiated with the press on a Swiss ski slope while his father watched from a hotel window.
How are you enjoying your holidays together?
Well, nice.
Enjoying it? It's good.
Fun.
Good fun.
Who's the best skier of all four?
Well, improving, you see, very good.
They're improving?
Very good skiers.
Look at this camera, please.
It may be a fustian bargain, but the young man has already learned his job and already learned to perform it with royal grace.
The aplomb of a future king. You talked with her in one of your meetings in London?
Well, shortly after she did that now famous, infamous interview, I did talk with her in London, and I asked her how her sons felt about this. And she said she had talked with them about this, and that they understood how she felt, and they understood the relationship between herself and their father, and that she did not want to speak against the father. She described William, the older son, as more sensitive. These are my interpretation of her words, perhaps a little more like her. The younger son was easier going. And I think what sums it up perhaps most to me is that at Christmas time a year ago, her Christmas card was herself with her 2 boys, and the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles's Christmas card was himself with his 2 boys.
Such as it is in divorced families. It reminds me a little bit of when Prince Charles was a boy. Prince Charles, you know, his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, sent him off to school to try to expose him to a greater extent than his mother and his grandparents had been. He hated it. And but that's amazing. You see in this interview, you talk about aplomb. That's tough facing all that press.
It is, but it comes back in a way to the idea of the way she wanted to change the monarchy and this fundamentally different view. There is a view in Britain, as we know, that you have to keep the mystery of the monarchy in order to preserve it. With the children instrumental in it, she believed that informality, some informality, was the key to saving the monarchy.
You know, as we talk, we show the pictures of millions of people grieving, and we're all sharing what small memories and what pleasures we had in the relationship. But the ones who must be grieving, obviously more than anyone else, whose lives will never, ever be the same. Of course, those 2 boys.
Can't bear to think about them.
I'm very struck, too, about how it's often said that we in America, and certainly in Europe, are almost more engaged with the royal family than the British are, in some ways. It is not the healthiest of institutions in the British House at the time, and she, Diana, both contributed to its elevation and to its reduction in some ways. But you keep thinking there are magazines in France and in Germany which put the royal family on a cover every week. Talked about people, they do it every week, 52 weeks a year, year after year after year, because there is this fascination. I'm enjoying learning from you both. We'll continue our coverage in just a moment. that's certainly when the world fell in love with Diana 16 years ago when she married Prince Charles. It is amazing now to think back as to how unsophisticated she appeared to us all at the time. In preparing our coverage today, we have been looking for people who understand the public pressure, what it means to behave in a dignified or undignified way in public, and also we've been looking for and talking to people who set an example for Diana, who counseled her in some way, so we'd better understand her impact. One of those people was clearly Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post. She has been up in Martha's Vineyard, and ABC's White House correspondent John Donvan talked to her today.
I thought she was lovely and natural and tried her best to do well by all her obligations. She obviously had big adversity to deal with. She had married at 19 into this really difficult situation. Nobody helped her. She had not been to a lot of college or education. And so I think she was driven by her heart. When she came to do a benefit for us, which was a breast cancer institute that the Post gives every year in Washington, she worked very hard. She did everything we asked her to do, and she was obviously an enormous asset to the benefit.
Did she talk to you about the problems of celebrity?
She did, and she talked to me about the problems of being pursued by the press, and she told me once that they had put a bug in her car, which she'd found and taken out. On the other hand, people have also said, and I suppose it's true, she did, as everybody does, you know, they have it both ways a little bit. They use the press, and then they, you know, then it goes too far and they complain about it with some justice. But she did talk to reporters. She obviously talked to people who wrote these books.
From what you know, do you hold the paparazzi responsible, or do you just not know enough?
I don't know enough, but I think that we have to make a sharp demarcation here between even the tabloid press and paparazzi. Paparazzi are people who lie in wait for celebrities like Diana and like Jacqueline Kennedy, and they print pictures of them for money. That's what they do. They're not, I mean, we're not talking about the press here.
I wanted to return to her visits to the island. Was she a guest at your home?
We developed this friendship up here that continued afterwards. I think that I talked freely to her and frankly to her, and she liked that. And I think she wasn't particularly used to people just saying what they thought. I mean, I said, what are you going to do with your life now? Are you going to be working? Should you go back to college? I don't think mostly people talk to her that way, and I think she really liked it.
The Washington Post accompanied Katharine Graham.
Lucky to have someone talk to you that way.
She's a very, very open and very caring woman.
We had talked earlier about sort of last memories. You know, the last time I saw her, I told her that I'd been talking with John Travolta. The name came up. And as soon as I mentioned his name, she did something, an endangered species of a gesture. She blushed. Absolutely crimson, and you could watch it crawl all the way up. As we know, she liked to hear about handsome Hollywood men. I think it wasn't just the girlish thing, which was very touching, but she felt they related to her life in some way. The famous dance at the Reagan White House, engineered in part by Mrs. Reagan looking out for everyone, was what began it all. So we asked John Travolta for a few thoughts about, I guess, the parallelism of their lives and that night.
Well, I was told that it was one of the biggest nights of her life, you know, and to say that I was proud or honored would be an understatement, because it was one of the biggest nights of my life. Reagan was in office at the time, and Nancy had asked if I please would dance with Diana, because it was her big wish coming to the States to, you know, she had one wish, and it was to dance with me. And I said, well, I was nervous, but I'd be glad to do it. So I went and asked her, and she blushed, and she said she'd love to. And we danced for about, it seemed about 10 minutes, every song that from one of, you know, some of the old movies that I'd done, and the whole the floor cleared, and it was kind of like a fairy tale.
He told us she found a way to make her life matter.
When I first heard the news, I did cry a lot, and for different reasons. The first was because I didn't like the idea of meaningful lives being cut short, and the second for her children. That was hard for me to imagine what it would do to them. And also, I guess missing her, but for reasons that I think that are very unique. And as a celebrity, you have choices you can make. You can kind of serve yourself with it, with the illusion of serving others. And she had this very huge ability to take that celebrity and do good for mankind.
And on the issue of the paparazzi?
I think that laws do have to be made for this kind of thing that's happening with the paparazzi, whether it's pursuit or whether it's invasion. And I also think that celebrities have to always keep in mind their safety in regard. So it's like a two-way street here that's happening. And I think now is a good time to pay attention to that.
Travolta also had a message for the family.
What I really want to say is to Charles and the boys that I'm very sorry that this happened, and that I want to be there for them if they need me. And I mean that literally. 24 hours a day. I'm very dependable when it comes to this kind of thing. I've lost people in my life, and I know how to help you through it. So I want to get a message to them about that, and that I care, and that I'll miss her, as everyone will. And I guess if I wanted to get a message to Diana, is that we are all better for knowing her. Everyone is, because she represented exactly what a celebrity should be in my book. And if we all could be as selfless as she was, we would all be better off for it, because it would be a better world. And she has made it a better world already.
John Travolta. We'll be back in just a moment. You'll be joining us for this program for the last 2 hours, and we hope you found it instructive and something to participate in. We have time only for a sentence from each of you.
A man at the accident site said it for me earlier in the 2 hours. He said, a light has gone out, and I'll miss the light.
Barbara?
I never thought I would say this publicly. I never have until tonight, but I considered her a friend. She was warm and huggable, and I grieve.
Thank you both very much for joining me. It's been very interesting listening to both of you. In London, one of the most widely read and widely circulated tabloids has already got the cover ready for tomorrow morning. Take a look at The Sun from London. Good night, our sweet princess. And on the back cover, it says what a lot of people have said today, we will never forget you. And the tabloid press, about which so many people have spoken today, and the press in general, will take up this story tomorrow in a very vigorous way. The plans for the funeral have not yet been decided, but tonight her body has been moved to the Chapel Royal at St. James Palace, not far from Buckingham Palace, where she once lived, very briefly, and where at St. James Palace she worked. My thanks again to both of you. Given the fact that we've talked so much about celebrity and how familiar she was to many people, we leave you this evening with our thanks for joining us, but also with very familiar images. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
Lisa Thomas-Laurie and Mark Howard.
Hello again. Lisa's off tonight. Rick Williams joins us, and here are some of the big stories we're following tonight on Action News. Buckingham Palace says Princess Diana's funeral service at Westminster Abbey will be by invitation only. Sources in Paris say the blood alcohol level of her driver was 3 times the legal limit in France, while a police source says the car's speedometer was frozen at 121 miles an hour.
And now the details. As the world continues to mourn the death of Princess Diana, word from Paris tonight is that alcohol is now looming as a major factor in the crash that took her life. Investigators in Paris now say the driver of the car carrying the princess and her friend Dodi Fayed was apparently driving drunk. They say Henri Paul's blood alcohol level was over 3 times the legal limit in France. Paul was an employee of the Ritz Hotel and was not their regular driver. The regular chauffeur had been sent out as a decoy to foil the paparazzi. But members of the paparazzi were chasing the princess's car when it barreled into the Paris tunnel at a high rate of speed. 7 photographers have been detained since the accident, and some may be charged. Investigators now say the car's speedometer was stuck at 121 miles an hour, but it's not clear if that's how fast it was going at the time of the crash. In London, Buckingham Palace announced that the funeral for Princess Diana will be held Saturday at Westminster Abbey. It will be invitation only, but will be televised. The princess's body will not lie in state. It is out of public view at St. James Palace, where thousands of mourners have stood in long lines to sign books expressing their condolences. Britain will virtually come to a halt on Saturday as the funeral procession travels from St. James Palace past Parliament Square to Westminster Abbey. Although President Clinton will not attend the funeral, he has already sent a letter of condolence to Britain's Prime Minister, saying all of us have lost a friend in Princess Di. And that is evidenced by the outpouring of grief. Outside Buckingham Palace and the princess's residence at Kensington Palace, mourners continue to leave floral tributes to mourn the loss of the people's princess.
The Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, was in Italy when she got word of her friend and former sister-in-law's death. The Duchess and her 2 daughters left Italy this morning to return to London, and Fergie's canceled plans to fly to New York this week to launch a big ad campaign for Weight Watchers. Former cavalry officer James Hewitt also cut short his vacation and returned home on word of the princess's death. Hewitt, who had an affair with the princess and then told the world about it in a book, says the world has truly lost a special person.
I'd like to say how much I loved and admired Diana, and at a time when she seemed to have found a certain and deserved happiness in her life, it has been so tragically and undeservedly taken away from her.
In a written statement, the father of the man with whom the princess had found happiness calls their deaths needless and cruel. Mohammed Al-Fayed says, quote, God took their souls to live together in paradise. Delegates to an international conference aimed at banning landmines have honored Princess Diana for her crusade against those lethal weapons.
I ask you all to raise and to observe 1 minute silence in memory of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Officials say Diana lent a human face to their cause. And moments of silence also held on the London financial markets today. Traders fell silent for 1 minute at the London Stock Exchange, the Lloyd's of London insurance market, and several big future exchanges. At Lloyd's, a worker rang a bell 1 time. In days before radio, that was the way the market informed traders of ships lost at sea. In Washington, D.C., the official mourning book has been opened for signing at the British Embassy. A line immediately formed outside for people wanting to pay respects to the late princess. Many mourners continue to leave tokens, tributes, and condolences. Flowers were strewn across the steps, from formal floral arrangements to simply hand-picked flowers.
Well, London is, of course, thousands of miles from here, but folks in the Delaware Valley have always been entranced by royalty and the princess nonetheless. Diana's death has and continues to be the talk of the town. And with more on that is Action News reporter Kristen Z, who is live on the Ben Franklin Parkway with more. Kristen.
Rick, this memorial here is growing by the minute. There are flowers, cards, and balloons, all under the British flag here on the Ben Franklin Parkway, because even though there is no consulate here, people want a place to honor Princess Di.
Elizabeth Singelis left flowers today at the Diana Memorial on the Parkway. The Elkins Park woman met the princess twice at charity functions.
She came right by, and for a split second she just came, and I said, oh, I think you're so lovely. She said, thank you very much and have a happy Christmas. It was Christmas time.
Singela says at one event, the paparazzi was merciless towards the princess.
So I wrote a letter and I said, I think next time you come and your public comes to see you, I think you should have a lot more security. They were pushing and shoving when they had ladders, and they're just very aggressive.
In response, Diana's office sent this thank you letter to Singela's.
She'll never know what she meant to people like me and my friend.
Mourners are also leaving flowers at Dickens Inn in Society Hill. The owner of the English pub splits his time between Philadelphia and London. He says Diana's death is a blow to the troubled monarchy.
Princess Di was the one person that everybody loved and looked to. Yes, people love the Queen, people love the Queen Mother, but younger people now will no longer look to the royal family.
British visitors at Independence Hall say at home many blame Prince Charles.
Because at the end of the day, if it wasn't through the divorce, which she very publicly admitted she didn't want, then she wouldn't be in Paris with Dodi.
You know, I thought this was the start of a life she could lead and be happy in, a single life or with someone that she cared about.
I just want to read you a poem written by a Philadelphia nurse. Diana, you were honest and strong and helped tear the walls down. You were beautiful inside and out, with or without your crown. And so from myself and others from Philadelphia too, rest in peace, dear Diana. We truly loved you. Reporting live in the Action Cam, I'm Kristen Z. Back to you.
All right, Kristen, thank you. The latest revelations about Diana's driver haven't eased people's anger and outrage over the behavior of the paparazzi. Amateur photographs taken by a tourist at the scene of the crash show the paparazzi trying to take pictures while the princess, Fayed, and the driver lay dying in the car. A French newspaper says some even pushed rescuers away in the moments after the crash so that they could continue snapping. American celebrities who have had their dealings with the paparazzi say this tragedy shows how far they have stepped over the line.
Well, the paparazzi, generally speaking, are scum. I mean, I know the paparazzi all too well, and you know, you're not dealing with very decent people for the most part, and it's a shame what happened.
If civilization doesn't learn from this, it will absolutely be very telling as to where we're headed.
A lawyer for the Fayed family says if the photographers are found to have contributed to the crash, they will sue for damages.
Of course, the stunning difference in this story and other complaints about the paparazzi is that for the first time, the victim died. Suzanne LaFranchi is live in the newsroom with more on that part of the story. Suzanne?
Well, Mark, despite reports that the chauffeur was apparently intoxicated at the time of the crash, there continues to be outrage at the so-called paparazzi. Now, many people I talked to say they at the very least should be held partially responsible for Diana's death. Wherever she was, they were there. Paparazzi, boldly, aggressively recording Diana's every move. Their hope to snap the elusive million-dollar picture.
There was a relationship which worked before, but now I can't tolerate it because it's become abusive, and it's harassment.
Harassment that may have gone too far. Many are blaming the paparazzi, at least in part, for the violent crash that cost the princess, her lover, and a driver their lives. Authorities say a pack of motorcycle paparazzi chased the chauffeur Diana at speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour.
I think they should be stopped. I don't think they should hound like they pursued her every move.
Russell Turiak, who appeared on AM Live, has been a paparazzi for more than 20 years. His biggest conquest, photos of JFK Jr. honeymooning in Istanbul. Pictures, he says, that netted him a six-figure sum. Turiak blames Dodi Al-Fayed for the fatal crash.
He's the one with all the power in the whole situation, and that he could have controlled it very easily, and he didn't. Now, to say that there's blood on the... I don't feel that there's blood on my hands over this.
There are reports that paparazzi snapped gruesome photos of Diana as she lay dying in the crumpled car. Pictures that have already been offered to tabloids for $250,000 each. Journalism professor Dr. David Womack says such compensation will only perpetuate the fierce competition.
They become more and more intrusive, more and more aggressive, and demanding that they're looking for this unique photograph.
Now, the paparazzi we talked to says even though the driver was reportedly drinking, he still thinks Dodi Al-Fayed was the one who had the most control in this situation. And even though he and Diana were being pursued by photographers, as they had hundreds of times before, they didn't have to flee at such a high rate of speed. I'm Suzanne LaFranchi, live in the newsroom.
Thanks, Suzanne. Officials at Mercedes-Benz, meanwhile, say Princess Diana and the other victims would not have survived that crash, no matter what car they might have been in. A company spokesman says the accident was so devastating that any safety standards within the S-Class car couldn't have given the passengers a real chance. There are reports that Diana and Doty, who were sitting in the back, were not wearing seatbelts.
It's entirely possible that rear seat occupants in that vehicle, as devastating as the crash was, could have survived with seat belts, because typically the rear seat is a very safe environment inside the car, and despite that devastation, it's possible those occupants in the rear seat could have survived without life-threatening injuries had they been properly belted in the rear seat.
Well, police say the bodyguard who was in the car in the front with Diana was wearing a seatbelt when the car crashed, and of course he also had the benefit of an airbag up front. He is in serious condition, but they say he is not in any life-threatening danger.
Diana's commitment to the sick and less fortunate was legendary. Health reporter Anita Brickman says she used the attention on her to help medical causes ranging from cancer to cerebral palsy to AIDS.
By the time Diana met the legendary Mother Teresa this summer, her own good works had earned her the nickname Saint Di. The princess reached out around the world to comfort the sick. She even shook hands with an Indonesian boy afflicted with leprosy. That touch helped break down stereotypes. In much the same way, Diana tackled fear and ignorance about AIDS. Seen here at the ribbon cutting for an AIDS hospice, Diana made HIV education and fundraising her crusade. She shared the stage with stars like George Michael on World AIDS Day and shook hands with an AIDS victim back in 1987 when few people publicly would.
I remember a great deal of to and fro with Buckingham Palace about whether she would wear gloves when she shook this person's hand when she came to the hospital. And of course, being Princess Diana, she said she certainly wasn't going to shake hands wearing gloves.
But was it more than compassion that motivated Princess Diana? Observers sometimes noted that she seemed more at ease in a hospital than at a state dinner. In a rare television interview, she explained why.
In hospices, for instance, when people are dying, they're much more open and more vulnerable and much more real than other people. And I appreciated that.
Diana was candid about her fight with bulimia and depression, although some royal watchers found it embarrassing to the royal family. That struggle gave her a special kinship with the sick. And Red Cross President Elizabeth Dole says Diana's vulnerability made her seem simply more like one of us.
People related to her because she was so genuine, and she inspired them because she was candid about her own problems, and they could see that she had been able to overcome her problems.
Anita Brickman, Channel 6 Action News.
And that is the very latest on the death of Princess Diana.
Thomas Laurie and Mark Howard.
Hello again. Lisa's off tonight.
7 members of the Paparazzi are now facing charges for their alleged role in the tragedy. A Paris judge placed them under formal investigation for involuntary manslaughter and failing to come to the aid of the dying princess, her companion Dodi Al-Fayed, and their driver. The Paparazzi were said to be chasing the princess's car when it slammed into a tunnel wall early Sunday. One photographer accused of blocking police at the scene has been barred from working during the investigation. In London, the impromptu memorial at the gates of Buckingham Palace continues to grow as mourners pay tribute to their princess, and thousands continue to stand in lines for hours to sign condolence books at St. James Palace. The public outpouring intensifies amid shocking revelations that the driver of the princess's car was apparently drunk and speeding. New reports say his blood alcohol level was 4 times France's legal limit. Here you see this. There you saw the surviving bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, and he may provide some answers, but unfortunately he remains in intensive care and in no condition to talk. 2,000 people are being invited to the princess's funeral at Westminster Abbey on Saturday. First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton will represent the U.S. Buckingham Palace has set up a memorial fund to benefit all of Diana's favorite charities, and the palace announced that Prince Charles has canceled all engagements through next week. The death of Princess Diana has forced Weight Watchers to withdraw a brand new ad campaign. The campaign features a brochure with a picture of spokeswoman Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Now, the opening line says they're talking about losing weight here. It's harder than outrunning the paparazzi. Fergie's publicist says the timing of the ad campaign is unfortunate.
Well, the princess's death has suddenly spurred interest in British memorabilia all around the world. Nora Mushanik found a wealth of it in a hotel in Bucks County, PA. Here's Nora's report.
The
The Black Bass Hotel in Lumberville, built in the 1740s, has a decidedly English air to it. Diners here come not just for the food, but to see the walls of memorabilia marking important events for the British monarchy over the last several hundred years.
Our friends from New York, when we were coming here, we said you're going to see a lot of the stuff from the royal family and things like that.
Of particular interest since her sudden death are the plates and cups and glasses bearing the likeness of Princess Diana.
Yesterday we actually had a few tables of teary-eyed ladies that, came in and saw the plates and were very emotional about it.
I just think it's very sad, and it's going to be a great loss to everybody.
82-year-old Herbert Ward is the innkeeper who's been collecting the royal memorabilia for decades.
Prince Charles and Princess Diana were married. They put out 3,000 different commemorative things, so you can have an idea that you never could finish getting them all.
The Black Bass Inn was once home to one of the largest collections of British royalty memorabilia in the world. Now, Ward sold most of his collection about 3 years ago, but hundreds of items still remain on display here. Some diners found being at the hotel and seeing the images of Diana somehow comforting.
I guess because whenever you're here, you'll always think of her, and she'll be in all our hearts.
The hotel has gotten a number of calls from people interested in coming to see the Diana memorabilia. Innkeepers say the curious will, of course, be given a royal welcome. I'm Nora Mushanek, Channel 6 Action News, Lumberville.
Of course, Action News is in London. Princess Diana. As the public outpouring of grief continues, Buckingham Palace issued a statement today thanking Britons for their overwhelming support of the princess. The statement said the royal family was deeply touched and enormously grateful. The palace has also lengthened the procession route to accommodate the crowd.